Let's head over to Menka, who's standing by in Davos with CP Gurnani of Tech Mahindra.
BloombergQuint. We're coming to you from the World Economic Forum's annual meeting here in Davos. And this morning I have with me CP Gurnani of Tech Mahindra to talk us through the outlook for the IT sector through the course of this year and the big changes that will take place in the course of this decade. Now, Tech Mahindra has not yet announced its earnings, so we're going to have to keep the conversation a little big picture. Mr. Gurnani, thank you so much for joining us. Let me start by asking you this prognosis of slightly slower growth this year globally, and maybe slower growth through the course of this decade. What does that tell you about the kind of demand that India's IT companies will face from clients abroad and the kind of growth trajectory that we'll see unfolding through the course of the next few years?
I'm actually quite upbeat about Indian IT sector, and more importantly, the role company Tech Mahindra would play in the new modern world. And I use the word modern is just to give you an indication that Tech Mahindra has taken bets on 5G, software-defined networks. It's clear indication, and the response that we are getting from the market is that 5G number of trials will increase dramatically through 2020. Many countries you would start seeing the rollouts, but in 2021, 5G will become a fabric on a lot of solutions. I was in one of the panels yesterday on future of mobility. I mean, cities like Delhi and Bombay, I mean, eventually I would like to believe that drones as an individual mode of transport is the future of mobility, but you cannot function a network of drones without a 5G connectivity.
Sure. So telecom is your largest vertical in terms of contributor to revenue. What kind of upside do you expect technologies like 5G to bring to you through the course of this year and maybe even the next few years, 3 to 5 years? Because this is going to be an extensive rollout, and the capex for telecom companies is going to take at least 5 to 7 years or 3 to 5 years for 5G conservatively.
Again, an off-the-cuff remark, and we were joking between a few of us in the senior leadership of TechM that our parent company Mahindra is called M&M, and for us the biggest opportunity in telecom is M&M, which means modernization and migration. Okay. And so what you're seeing out here is that in telecom the modernization has to take place. Modernization of networks, modernization of the software systems that back you up, and the migration of telcos to becoming a more enterprise-oriented business house. So whether they choose an health tech, or whether they choose a media, or whether they choose a sports, but you would see the telcos starting to do a lot more migration into integrated services.
Impact on revenue?
As I said, we are in a silent period. So
no, I'm talking about you're in a silent period for this quarter, not for this year. Next year and the next 3 years,
so,
right?
Menka, again, we have never given any forecast.
No, impact on revenue from the point of view of, given that this is your biggest vertical, given that this is a big transition that will take place for telecom communication companies across the world, what kind of upside to revenue do you hope this will bring you in percentage terms?
I don't know. We have never given any kind of a future guidance, whether it is for the industry in terms of real numbers. As I said, I do believe telcos around the world are modernizing, and we will have a fair play. It is our biggest sector, and it is also, we are the largest service provider in this segment.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Banking, financial services, many of your peer companies in India have said that things seem a little softer, but Gartner seems to suggest that in fact BFSI spending is going to increase marginally, but this year. So what's your outlook on what that sector will bring you?
For us, it is a significant portion of our revenue, but not the biggest.
Yes.
What we are seeing is that in banking and financial services, omni-channel customer experiences, the banks are investing. The banks are modernizing, particularly for their migration to cloud, because banks were slow adopters to cloud. You know, for them, data security and whether cloud is secure or not, it took a much longer period. And number 3 is cybersecurity. Number 4th is risk management. So I tend to agree with Gartner that the spending in banks will increase, and the reasoning is very simple, is that the customers have become a lot more demanding and choosy, and the banks have to respond with technology.
In both these cases, both in telecom and in BFSI, what kind of deals? Will the deal structures change dramatically? Like, will 5G mean bigger deals for you, longer gestation periods for you? Will the deal structure and therefore the revenue realization change in any fashion?
You know, generic statement here. Generic statement is that most of the customers are now not that keen on a big bang approach. That means, and the digital transformation by itself lends itself to doing agile, accretive development. So I don't see too many large deals, but at the same time, I think it is a series of technology spends and which will propel the market. But wherever there is a large deal, yes, the revenue realization may happen in the same year, but the profit realization comes only in the second and third year.
Both for telecom and BFSI, are you saying
every large deal, because it includes a transformation piece, it takes into account a transition piece.
Sure.
And we as a service provider, if we are doing that large deal, we will have to invest in transition and transformation.
So the incremental orders that will come from, let's say, 5G, or from, as you pointed out, I think banks transitioning to a more cloud-based platform, those incremental orders will be large, as you said. Revenue realization in that year, but like you pointed out, the profit will get spread over several years. Now, will you have to invest considerable amounts of money in reskilling your people to be able to look at these new areas of business, or invest in talent differently? And therefore, can you give us an idea of what kind of margin impact these kinds of deals will have?
Most of the larger companies already have taken into account in their portfolio. For example, this is a question of how you manage your yield, and I would like to believe that there is no margin impact, because all of us at any given point of time is doing an X percentage in large deals. That means within the flight we have a few transformation projects happening. So I don't see in future the yield management changing or the portfolio mix changing.
Okay, your operating margins are lower than some of your peers. Is there a plan of action in place on how you expect to be able to boost them and make them more competitive over the course of this year and next?
I mean, I'm sure each shareholder wants us to improve, but I think we will remain. There will obviously be an improvement, but we are not going to be the highest margin, because I am going to balance my growth and operating margin, and I am going to press the pedal harder on growth.
Okay, one final question, a big picture question this is. A few years ago we were very worried about whether Indian IT was losing its edge given the big shift to digital. Now, many companies have been able to get their act together and pitch for large digital deals, and for companies like TCS, Infosys, 40% now of their deal pipeline is digital. Has Indian IT made that transition in a smooth fashion? Do you believe that as an industry we're prepared for what this next 10 years will bring us, or the kind of prominence that we had in the early or the first decade of this millennium, that will slowly fade as the nature of the business changes?
To a large extent, as we enter this decade, you would have noticed that the men and boys are getting separated. You would have also noticed is that many companies like Tech Mahindra chose to invest. 5G continues to be my investment phase. Similarly, you saw many organizations either investing in platforms or investing in creating digital capability
and
or
some
the products.
Right? Like HCL.
So direction each company has now taken, there is nothing which is 100% similar. That's the first part. And the second part is those who are not invested have chosen to merge with other companies. So I do believe that the go-go days of 20% growth may not happen, but 8 to 10% growth is sustainable for most of the large Indian IT companies.
Okay, and sorry, I did say that was my final question, but I do have one more. You know, climate change is a big point of conversation here in Davos, and of course it should be. But I'm wondering if there are business opportunities, right? There are several technology companies talking about, and this is from the industrial point of view, talking about being able to develop technologies that lead industry towards a more carbon neutral fashion. Is there an opportunity for India's IT industry in this transition?
So let's go back. It's not a Y2K.
No, it isn't.
Right?
Course, yes.
While sitting in Davos, we may say the slogan is sustain or perish.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
But
carbon neutrality, people are putting down 10, 20 years down the line, right? And it's a slow process.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's not a Y2K. And so, Menka, there is a business opportunity. The first part of this business opportunity is always in energy management.
Sure, industrial tech, yeah.
Right? And then as you go forward, everything that you do, whether it's an industry 4.0 or whether you do smart cities or smart grids, I mean, there is an opportunity because sustainability becomes your differentiator. It becomes a platform to measure and improve. Okay. So it is clearly an opportunity, but not as big as Y2K.
All right, Mr. Gurnani, thank you so much for joining us here in Davos, and have a good rest of your trip.
Sure, thank you, Venka, thank you.
That's Tech Mahindra with their thoughts. Let's bring in the management of Radico Khaithan to decode their quarterly numbers. Dilip Banthia, the CFO of the company, joins us right now on the show to talk about those. Mr. Banthia, thanks so much for being patient with us today. We had just a couple of interviews that we had to go to before we come to you, but I appreciate you holding on to the line. Summarize the quarter for us, the revenue numbers.